What happens when two global figures walk into a studio designed for polite applause, and leave it divided by silence? On a mild Manhattan morning, the lights inside the studio of The View glowed with their usual warmth. The set was dressed in soft amber tones, carefully calibrated to feel safe. Comfortable. Civil, the kind of place where disagreements were wrapped in smiles and resolved before the next commercial break. The audience filed in with paper cups of coffee and murmured anticipation. Producers adjusted cue cards. Floor managers whispered countdowns. Everything felt choreographed, rehearsed, predictable. Until it wasn't. The doors opened first for Prince Harry. He stepped onto the stage to applause that was loud, enthusiastic, almost protective. He wore a navy-tailored suit, open collar, no tie, carefully relaxed. Approachable royalty. The expression on his face was composed, measured, as if he had already rehearsed not just what he would say, but how he would feel while saying it. He waved lightly. A practiced smile. A nod toward Whoopi Goldberg at the table. He moved with the awareness of someone who has never once entered a room unnoticed. He sat. Moments later, from the opposite wing of the stage, came Angelina Jolie. The applause changed. Not louder. Different. Slower. Heavier. Weighted with something closer to respect than excitement. She wore black. No glitter. No ornament. Her posture was upright, her movements economical. She did not scan the audience. She did not play to the cameras. She acknowledged the hosts with a slight nod and folded her hands loosely in her lap. If Harry's entrance was kinetic, hers was gravitational. The temperature in the room felt subtly altered, not colder, not warmer, just charged. Like the air before a thunderstorm when everything looks normal but your skin knows better. Whoopi smiled into the camera. "We're honored to have two people here today," she began, voice warm, practiced, who've dedicated their lives to causes bigger than themselves. Harry inclined his head modestly. Angelina gave a single nod. The first 10 minutes unfolded exactly as producers hoped. Harry spoke about mental health advocacy, about redefining masculinity, about stepping away from institutions that no longer aligned with his values. His voice was steady, conversational. He told the story in the rhythm of someone who had refined it through repetition, measured pauses, slight self-deprecating humor, flashes of vulnerability delivered with precision. The audience responded on cue. Murmurs of empathy. Gentle applause. Heads nodding. Angelina listened. Not passively. Not admiringly. She listened the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, calm, focused, evaluating structure beneath surface. When her turn came, her voice was quieter. It didn't need to be louder. She spoke about refugee camps. About displaced families who no longer remembered what home meant. About children who had learned to distinguish the sound of drones from the sound of thunder. Her words were simple. Unembellished. She did not narrate herself as a hero. She framed the work as unfinished. Ongoing. Necessary. The audience leaned forward. There was a contrast now. Not hostile. Not yet. But distinct. Joy Behar smiled, sensing the dynamic. "It's fascinating," she said, "how advocacy can take so many forms." Harry picked up on it immediately. "Yes," he replied lightly. "And I think what matters most is using your platform. If you have a voice and you don't use it loudly, what's the point?" It was meant as an inclusive statement. A broad one. Angelina shifted slightly in her chair. "Sometimes," she said calmly, "the loudest work happens where there is no platform." The sentence was soft. Controlled. But it landed like a subtle shift in gravity. Harry smiled. "Well," he answered, "some of us don't get the luxury of working in silence." A flicker. Small. Almost invisible. Angelina's fingers tightened briefly before relaxing again. Whoopi glanced between them, sensing the edge but letting it breathe. The conversation moved forward. Harry described growing up under constant scrutiny. Every gesture analyzed. Every mistake magnified. He spoke about walking away as an act of courage. Of self-preservation. His voice carried conviction. Angelina listened. Then, without turning fully toward him, she asked, not directly to Harry, but to the room, "Do you think choosing visibility is the same as being forced into it?" The audience stilled. Harry turned toward her now, eyebrows lifting slightly. "I don't think I chose visibility," he said. "It was assigned to me." Angelina met his gaze. "And yet," she replied, "you still choose how you use it." There it was. Not an attack. A distinction. Harry leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. Defensive posture disguised as casual ease. "Some people don't understand what it's like," he said, "to have your entire life dissected. Every decision framed as performance." Angelina nodded once. "I do," she said quietly. "I just learned that not every response needs an audience." Silence. Not awkward. Heavy. The audience felt it. The hosts felt it. Even the camera operators shifted their footing slightly, as if bracing for something unnamed. Joy tried to soften it. "Well, clearly both of you have had very different paths." "Different paths," Harry said, smile tightening, "but I think there's a tendency to romanticize suffering when it looks noble from a distance." Angelina did not interrupt. "Suffering doesn't need romance," she said. "It needs responsibility." The first crack. Invisible. Irreversible. A producer offstage adjusted his headset. Someone in the audience shifted in their seat. Harry's jaw tightened just slightly. "I repeat my story," he said evenly, "because people don't listen. Because institutions bury truth unless it's forced into the open." Angelina's response came measured, almost reflective. "Or because some truths don't change," she said, "no matter how often they're told." A murmur rolled through the audience. Whoopi shifted in her chair. "Let's talk about service," she suggested quickly. Harry leaned forward now, elbows on his knees. "Service without accountability is just charity theater." Angelina turned fully toward him for the first time. "Interesting," she said softly. "Because from where I stand, service that never leaves. The microphone is performance." The room inhaled collectively. Harry straightened, eyes narrowing slightly. "So now you're questioning my motives?" "No," she replied. "I'm questioning outcomes." Beat. Longer than television usually allows. Harry's smile vanished entirely now. "You don't get to decide how I heal," he said. "And you don't get to decide how the world sees you," Angelina replied. The cameras kept rolling. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent, so they did neither. The rules of the conversation had shifted, and everyone in the room felt it. This was no longer an exchange of philosophies. It was a collision of identities. Harry leaned back again, arms crossing tightly now. "I walked away from everything," he said. "Titles. Privilege. Protection. And then you sold the story," Angelina said. "Again." The word again lingered in the air like smoke. Harry laughed, sharp, humorless. "So that's how you see it." "I see what's presented," she replied calmly. "And I listen to what's repeated." A crew member offstage whispered, "Oh no." Whoopi cleared her throat, but the momentum had shifted beyond her control. "You think you're above this," Harry said. Angelina shook her head once. "No," she said. "I just don't confuse scrutiny with purpose." Something in Harry's posture hardened. "You know what's exhausting?" he asked, voice tightening. "Being told your pain is branding. That your fight is performance. Angelina did not blink. What's exhausting, she replied quietly, is watching pain become identity. A ripple of stunned sound moved through the audience. And that was the moment. Not loud. Not explosive. But decisive. The conversation had crossed an invisible line. Harry's breathing had changed, shallower now. His hand flexed against his knee. Angelina remained still. Calm. Measured. Unmoved. Whoopi leaned forward. "All right," she said carefully. "We're going to take a breath." But Harry wasn't breathing. He was bracing. And somewhere behind the bright studio lights and polite applause, something had shifted in the room that no commercial break could fix. Because when the cameras came back, this wouldn't be about advocacy anymore. It would be about control. And one of them was about to realize they were losing it. When the cameras came back on, the applause was uneven. Some clapped out of habit. Some didn't clap at all. The warm amber lighting of the view hadn't changed, but the atmosphere had. The air felt thinner. The studio no longer resembled a daytime talk show set. It felt like a courtroom where no one had agreed to be on trial. Prince Harry sat upright now, shoulders squared, hands clasped tightly together as if holding something invisible in place. The easy posture he'd arrived with, the relaxed lean, the approachable smile, had vanished. In its place was something sharper. Alert. Defensive. Across from him, Angelina Jolie remained composed. She hadn't shifted much at all. Her back straight. Hands folded loosely. Chin slightly lifted. If tension existed, it moved around her rather than through her. Whoopi Goldberg forced a steady smile. "Welcome back," she said, her tone deliberately lighter than the room deserved. "Let's reset." Harry let out a quiet scoff, barely audible, but caught by the mic. Angelina didn't react. Joy Behar leaned forward carefully. "Harry," she said, choosing each word with visible caution, "a lot of people watching relate to your story. But some also wonder, do you ever worry that telling it so often locks you into it?" The question hung in the air. Harry turned to her quickly. "No," he said, immediate and firm. "What locks people in is silence." Angelina's gaze shifted slightly toward him. "Sometimes," she said evenly, "silence is how you move on." A ripple passed through the audience, quiet, uncertain. Harry laughed again, this time shorter, edged with disbelief. "Easy to say," he replied, "when the world listens to you without demanding explanations." Angelina's eyes didn't waver. "The world listens," she said, "when you stop demanding to be heard." A sharp intake of breath spread across the front row. Whoopi raised her hands gently. "All right," but Harry leaned forward, voice rising for the first time, not loud, but no longer controlled. "So now I'm demanding." Angelina tilted her head slightly. "You're insisting," she corrected softly. The distinction was surgical. Harry's jaw flexed. "You don't get it," he said, his words tightening. "You were admired. Protected. Celebrated. I was dissected." Angelina nodded once. "And yet," she replied, "I didn't make it my shield." That landed harder than anything before. The audience didn't clap. They didn't murmur. They just stared. Harry blinked, momentarily thrown. His right hand gripped the edge of the table. "You're implying I hide behind my pain," he said, voice strained now. "I'm saying," Angelina answered carefully, "that pain can become armor, or it can become baggage." The silence that followed felt engineered. A producer offstage shifted in place. A camera operator adjusted his focus, hands slightly trembling. Harry leaned back abruptly, then forward again, as if unsure where to put himself. "You think I wanted this?" he snapped. "You think I enjoy reliving it?" Angelina's voice softened, but only slightly. "I think," she said, "you've built a life around it. The words hovered. And I don't think you know who you are without it. The reaction was immediate and visceral. A mix of gasps and stunned whispers surged through the studio. One audience member clapped once, too quickly, then stopped. Whoopi's expression hardened. Angelina, she warned gently. But Angelina didn't look away from Harry. Harry's face flushed, color rising across his cheeks. His breathing grew shallow. You don't get to psychoanalyze me on daytime television, he said, his voice shaking now, not with volume, but with contained force. I'm not psychoanalyzing you, she replied calmly. I'm responding to what you've presented. Harry pushed his chair back slightly. The legs scraped against the floor with a harsh, jarring sound that cut through the room like metal on glass. You sit there, he said, eyes blazing now, perfectly composed. Perfectly unbothered. Acting like you're above it. Angelina stood. Not abruptly. Not theatrically. She simply rose to her feet, smoothing her jacket with a small, controlled motion. I'm not above it, she said quietly. I'm beyond it. The word beyond shifted something irreversible. Harry stood halfway, then sat back down again, a flicker of hesitation. A crack in his own certainty. You think you're better than me? He demanded. Angelina shook her head. No, she said. I think you're stuck. The word stuck echoed. Harry stood fully this time. The audience reacted instantly, some rising slightly from their seats, others frozen. Whoopi stood too, palms out, attempting to stabilize the moment. All right, she said firmly. That's enough. But Harry wasn't listening to her anymore. I came here, he said, voice rising, to speak my truth. Not to be dismissed. I didn't dismiss you, Angelina replied. I listened. And then I disagreed. Harry laughed bitterly. This show pretends to support honesty, he said, scanning the panel, until it makes people uncomfortable. Whoopi's voice cut in, low and firm. We support respect. The room vibrated with tension. Angelina didn't raise her voice. There's a difference, she said softly, between honesty and repetition. Harry's eyes flashed. You win, he said sarcastically. You always do. Quietly. From your pedestal. There is no pedestal, Angelina replied. Just distance. That word, distance, felt like a final diagnosis. Harry froze. For a split second, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then it hardened. Right, he said. I'm done. He reached up, unclipped his microphone, and dropped it onto the table. The dull thud echoed louder than it should have. No music swelled. No dramatic sting played. Just the sound of something final. The audience erupted, not in applause, not in boos, but in stunned, chaotic noise. Shock without direction. Harry grabbed the back of his chair, pushed it aside, and stepped away from the table. Angelina remained standing. She did not follow him with her eyes. She did not react. Her stillness was louder than his movement. Whoopi called after him once, Harry, but it was already too late. He walked toward the curtain. Not storming. Not shouting. Walking. The curtain parted. Closed softly. And just like that, the chair was empty. The studio felt cavernous now. Angelina slowly sat back down. The empty space beside her felt deliberate. Almost symbolic. Joy whispered under her breath, forgetting her mic was still live, oh my God. Whoopi turned to the camera, her professionalism reassembling itself in real time. We're going to take a moment, she said carefully. But the moment had already taken them. Behind the cameras, producers scrambled. Social feeds exploded. Phones vibrated. Words like walkout and meltdown were already spreading faster than facts. In the studio, though, it was quieter. Angelina folded her hands again. Her expression unreadable. Whoopi glanced at her. "Angelina," she said softly. "Thank you for staying." Angelina nodded once. "Conversation matters," she replied. "Even when it's uncomfortable." The weight of that sentence settled heavily. Because somewhere beyond the studio walls, the world was already choosing sides. Was he provoked? Was she calculated? Was this a collapse, or a confrontation long overdue? The cameras cut to commercial once more. But this time, everyone in the room knew something irreversible had happened. When they came back, Prince Harry would not return. And the emptiness beside Angelina would say more than any argument ever could. What happens after the storm leaves the room, but the silence stays behind? When the cameras flickered back to life inside the glowing studio of The View, something felt permanently altered. The set hadn't changed. The amber lighting still bathed the panel in warmth. The skyline backdrop still shimmered with artificial Manhattan calm. But one chair was empty. The absence of Prince Harry was louder than his voice had ever been. The applause sign blinked on. A few audience members clapped hesitantly. Others stared at the vacant seat, as if expecting him to reappear, as if the story might reverse itself if they waited long enough. He didn't. At the table, Angelina Jolie sat alone on one side now, posture unchanged. Hands folded lightly. Shoulders relaxed. Breathing steady. If she felt the weight of what had just happened, she carried it without display. Across from her, Whoopi Goldberg inhaled slowly, the kind of breath someone takes before stepping onto thin ice. "Welcome back," Whoopi said, her voice grounded but firmer now. "Less host. More anchor." No one mentioned his name immediately. They didn't have to. The empty chair did that work for them. Joy shifted in her seat, attempting a half-smile that didn't quite settle. "Well," she said quietly, "that was something." The audience let out an awkward ripple of nervous laughter. It dissolved almost instantly. Angelina's gaze moved briefly to the empty chair, then back to Whoopi. "Conflict doesn't scare me," she said evenly. "Avoiding it does." The words landed differently now. Not as challenge. Not as provocation. But as explanation. Whoopi studied her for a moment. "And walking away?" she asked carefully. Angelina's expression didn't harden. It didn't soften either. It clarified. "Walking away can be power," she said. "Or it can be surrender. The difference is whether you've said what needed to be said." The audience absorbed that quietly. No applause. Just listening. Behind the cameras, producers were already managing damage control. Phones pressed to ears. Graphics teams preparing lower thirds. Publicists texting statements in carefully drafted language. Outside the studio walls, social media had erupted. Clips of the walkout replayed in rapid loops. Comment sections filled with polarized verdicts. Some calling him brave. Some calling him thin-skinned. Some praising her composure. Others accusing her of calculation. But inside this room, the temperature had dropped into something steadier. Angelina rested her hands on the table. Her fingers, once loosely interlaced, now lay open. Relaxed. Whoopi leaned forward slightly. "I want to be clear," she said into the camera. "We invite guests here to speak freely. But we also expect respect, for each other, for the space, and for the people watching." There was no applause cue this time. Just stillness. Angelina nodded once in agreement. The silence between sentences stretched longer than daytime television usually tolerates. But no one rushed to fill it. The emptiness beside her demanded patience. Joy cleared her throat. "Angelina," she asked, voice softer now, "did you expect that reaction?" Angelina paused before answering. "Not for effect. For accuracy." No, she said honestly. I expected disagreement. I didn't expect departure. The word departure felt deliberate. Not dramatic. Not judgmental. Just factual. Whoopi glanced again at the empty chair. The indentation in the cushion was still visible. A faint reminder of presence. The segment attempted to continue. Questions shifted back to humanitarian work, to policy, to global responsibility. Angelina answered with the same measured tone she had carried from the beginning. Calm. Precise. Focused outward rather than inward. But the audience wasn't just listening to her words anymore. They were watching her restraint. They were measuring the contrast. Every time the camera angle widened, that empty seat slipped back into frame, a quiet accusation or a quiet defense, depending on who was watching. At one point, a member of the audience began to clap after one of Angelina's answers. The applause grew slowly, uncertainly, until it filled the room. Angelina inclined her head slightly. No victory smile. No triumphant energy. Just acknowledgement. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about endurance. As the segment approached its close, Whoopi folded her hands together. Well, she said, exhaling softly, this has been real. The word real felt earned. Angelina allowed the smallest hint of a smile, not pleased, not smug. Reflective. Conversations should be, she replied. Joy glanced again at the empty space. You think he'll regret walking out? She asked before she could stop herself. A risky question. Angelina didn't rush her response. Regret depends on intention, she said. If you leave to protect yourself, you feel justified. If you leave to protect your image, you feel exposed. The audience reacted, not loudly, but sharply. A collective intake of breath. Whoopi let the sentence hang. Because everyone understood. This wasn't about who had the last word. It was about who stayed. As the final seconds ticked down, Whoopi turned to the camera once more. Sometimes, she said carefully, the most powerful thing you can do is listen. And sometimes, the hardest thing you can do, is stay. The camera slowly widened. The table. The hosts. Angelina. The empty chair. A visual imbalance impossible to ignore. The credits music began to swell softly beneath the tension, but it couldn't soften it. Angelina stood as the segment wrapped. She thanked the hosts quietly. She thanked the audience. She didn't mention Harry again. She didn't look toward the exit. She simply stepped away from the table. Controlled. Measured. Complete. The studio lights dimmed slightly as crew members moved in to reset the stage for the next topic. The world outside would argue for days. Headlines would choose sides. Commentators would dissect every sentence, every pause, every flicker of expression. But the image that lingered wasn't the argument. It wasn't the raised voice. It wasn't even the walkout. It was the chair. Empty. Still. Unanswered. Because sometimes the walkout isn't the statement. The stillness that follows is. And somewhere beyond the glow of studio lights, beyond the trending hashtags and divided opinions, one truth settled quietly into place: not every argument is won by leaving. And not every silence is weakness. Sometimes the person who remains seated holds the room. And sometimes the one who stands up first realizes too late, they were never in control of it. If you felt the tension in that studio, if you watched that empty chair and felt the weight of what wasn't said, then you already understand why moments like this define more than headlines. They reveal character. They reveal control. They reveal who stays when staying becomes uncomfortable. If you enjoy cinematic deep dives into explosive on-air confrontations like this one, make sure to like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who believes every walkout tells the whole story. Because sometimes It's the silence that changes everything.